Welcome everyone to Here and Now. It's Brother Steve with Dr. Abraheim, and we want to give you some updates on things that are going on related to the war and other parts of the struggle around the world. How you doing, Abraham? Abraham, good morning.
Oh, I'm sort of a bit down with the influenza that's gone around the world that the health authorities, have nothing to say about. But we're recording second time this week, because of the developments that have taken place that are accelerating. And not the war that's accelerating, the resistance to the war is accelerating. And that's why we're here to let you all know about it, because the regular media, even the social media of major import like Al Jazeera, they're not reporting about this. There is a mutiny happening, and we're going to prove it to you.
Who's involved in the mutiny? What branch? Where? Share more information.
Okay, here we go. Here it is. We're on TikTok, which is not American, right? TikTok is Chinese, so it doesn't censor this information. See this here? Okay.
Sailors actually took undershirts and stuffed them into the toilets to cause them to back up.
Wow.
I know that the crew's very, very unhappy with being at sea now for what, 10 months? And before this is over, it will have been a year. They went to Suda Bay. I think they tried to address some of this. And now they've pulled out of Suda Bay after what, 48 hours or a little more than that to repair things. But you're talking about something else that's hugely important. I don't want to go into great detail, but logistics in the region is very problematic right now. Places we formerly were able to utilize, we can't because of the Huckabee interview, frankly. That particular revelation has turned almost everybody against us in the region. So the Navy is now looking as far away as India and ports there that they can go to as required. Sailors actually took undershirts and stuffed.
That's the old story. That already happened like last week. Now, ah,
I know from my sources in the Navy that sailors actually took undershirts and stuffed them into the toilets to cause them to back up.
yeah, we know.
I know that the crew's very, very unhappy with being at sea now for what, 10 months? And before this is over, it will have been a year. They went to Suda Bay. I think they tried to address some of this. And now they've pulled out of Suda Bay after what, 48 hours? Crew's very, very unhappy with being at sea now for what, 10 months? And before this is over, it will have been a year. They went to Suda Bay. I think they tried to address some of this. And now they've pulled out of Suda Bay after what, 48 hours or a little more than that to repair things. But you're talking about something else that's hugely important. I don't want to go into great detail, but logistics in the region is very problematic right now. Places we formerly were able to utilize, we can't because of the Huckabee interview, frankly. That particular revelation has turned almost everybody against us in the region. So the Navy is now looking as far away as India and ports there that they can go to as required.
Do you know about the Huckabee interview? Do you know what that is? That's an interview with the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And this guy was interviewed, and somebody astutely asked him, do you agree with Benjamin Netanyahu's King BB, otherwise known as Milkowski, has stated that he's in favor of the Greater Israel Project, and he thinks that there's a passage in the Torah in the Old Testament which says that the land of Canaan, was belonging to them. They had no name at the time. you know. I mean, they were called Israel, but that was the name of a people, not of a land. The land itself was called Canaan. Okay, so Huckabee was asked, if he agrees, that all the land of Canaan, is belonging, to the Israel nation, who were nomadic, peoples wandering around in the Sinai for 40 years. And he says yes. Like he agrees, with Netanyahu and all the rest, that the Greater Israel Project is what it's all about. Israel should just go ahead and, and occupy all the territories around it, from the Nile to the Euphrates. So, after that, the Arab world, didn't think very much of the United States of America. Okay, here's another report here.
Sailors in the Navy are so pissed off at Donald Trump that they're filling their boat with literal shit. If you haven't heard, the USS Ford is in the Middle East, seemingly to prepare for war with Iran. But the problem is these soldiers have been on this ship since June of 2025, which is over 240 days. This is almost the longest deployment of any group of sailors on a ship ever, and they are quite frankly fed up. Morale is in the toilet, so to speak. I mean, they've missed their children being born. They've missed funerals. They've missed so much being on this ship for so long. And it's all because Donald Trump has deployed them twice already and is looking to deploy them a third time because he's considering war with Iran. And that's only if, of course, Iran doesn't agree to the deal negotiated with President Obama, by the way, that Donald Trump ripped up, which is to not make any nuclear weapons and allow inspectors in Iran to make sure that they don't make said nuclear weapons. Now, this, of course, is costing taxpayers millions. Morale is in the shitter, which means many of these soldiers want to leave the Navy, which costs money and training costs. And every time they have to clean out the sewage from the stuff that the soldiers have purposely flushed, like socks and shirts, to cause a problem to hopefully go home, it costs $400,000 to clean. And most likely, if we do go to war, and all signs are pointing that direction, the soldiers will break the record for most amount of time on a ship ever. I mean, who can blame them for being pissed off? Sailors in the Navy are so pissed off at Donald Trump that they're filling their boat with literal shit. If you haven't heard, the USS Ford is in the Middle East, seemingly to prepare for war with Iran. But the problem is these soldiers have been on this ship since June of 2020.
So this is sabotage before the war even started. Okay. There's the similar account there. Okay, now this here. This is...
So I strongly believe there will be a military coup in the United States this month, probably within the next 2 weeks. And that is a huge call, but I reckon I've got the receipts to back it up. First of all, things are not going well for the US on, well, pretty much every single front. The war is a total disaster, and Hegseth is one of the most detested war leaders in history, a man who seems to have no strategy beyond his own unshakable belief in US military superiority, and his own insane belief that the war is a literal holy crusade like the fucking Middle Ages. Even as US bases are being destroyed all over West Asia, aircraft carriers are being knocked out of commission, and stealth planes that are supposed to be undetectable are falling from the sky, and reports of morale in the US military being so low that there are mutinies happening everywhere. Hegseth has also been firing generals left, right, and center, which is always a great sign your war is going well. On top of all this, the US economy is hanging by a thread. The US dollar is only propped up by two things: the global monopolization of the oil trade and the fear of the US military. Iran has now destroyed both of those things, leaving the US economy drowning in debt and AI speculation that is being proven to be shitter and shitter every single day. All basic government services in the US have been defunded and gutted, from airports to education to healthcare to basic infrastructure, so everything running the country can be intentionally crashed and sold off for corporate profits. The US government itself is so cartoonishly corrupt at this point that every branch is now just a single amorphous blob of cronyism, nepotism, bribery, lobbying, to the point that insider trading seems to be the only deciding factor for all political decisions. All of this, combined with the corporate media fanning the flames of culture war 24/7, means the US as a political entity will soon buckle under the weight of its own unfettered corruption and capitalist incompetence. Now, some people think the US will break up into smaller countries, and that's quite possible. But what will happen first, and I am almost 100% sure of this now, is there will be a military coup. And it's imminent. I'm talking like 2 to 4 weeks here. It actually makes perfect sense. As an imperial power, the US has always revered its military above all else. And in this time of unprecedented crisis, the opportunity exists for some ambitious general to storm the White House and save America. They would be welcomed with open arms. I'm talking screeching eagles, zooming jets, the whole thing. Whether the military dictatorship ultimately succeeds or fails or proves to be the catalyst of the breaking up of the states itself, who can say? But I almost certainly guarantee it is coming, because if this has crossed my mind, then it has certainly crossed the mind of US generals, and their plans are already underway. And it seems extremely fitting that the last country the US would ever coup would be itself. So bookmark this video and let's see if I'm right 2 weeks from now. Something to think about.
Okay. Now, 20 generals have been dismissed, okay, by Hegseth, the Minister of War Crimes, the Secretary of War Crimes.
Okay.
So, what does that represent in the U.S. military? My military consultant here said that that's about a third of the U.S. military right there, and then because each of those generals commands the loyalty of a certain percentage of the military, each of
Okay.
them on their own. Now, altogether, 20 means 20 times, what they commanded, in the first place. However, there's also U.S. military generals who are making speeches to their subordinates before being deployed, calling for Armageddon. I've learned how to pronounce that word. They're into a crusader mentality. They think that they're all crusader warriors there. So there's a large number of U.S. generals who are into a crusade, a Christian crusade against the Muslims, who how do they denounce them? There's some sort of a term that's used to justify the genocide of Muslims. There's sort of an equivalent, like ISIS designation of infidels, deserve to die because they don't believe in Islam. But that's ISIS. But there's, the corresponding, phenomena amongst the Christian denominations, mostly Protestant, who are also calling for a war on the Muslims for some reason. And they plan to take over the Western Orient and take it and take the oil, as Trump says, he says, go take it, take the Strait of Hormuz, he's speaking to Europe, and use it, it's gusher, you make a lot of money, just take the oil, it belongs to you. Why? Because you need it. Therefore, it belongs to you. That's the only logic, that one can explain such a commentary with. So really, this reminds me of the battleship Potemkin in the Russian Revolution against the Tsar after he lost the war against Japan, and after, in the midst of losing the war against Prussia in the First World War, the battleship Potemkin there, anchored off the port of Petersburg at the time, just took over the, the ship and turned it into a sort of a bastion of revolution. And of course, they wouldn't let any kind of revolutionaries onto the ship, and they were self-sufficient. And so, the Tsar couldn't suppress the revolutionary upsurge because the military is the military. Who's going to suppress military insurrection? There's no other military, to do so. Like the military is the military. That's it. That's all. And the military decides. Once it decides, that it's going to overthrow the regime, then it can do so. Now, the relationship of forces between the 20 generals who are dismissed and the Crusader generals who rest in place there. How many of them are there? Now, what is the direction that each of them, assume? Now, the 20 generals, dissident generals, they could be deciding that, like if Trump is going to order a land invasion of Iran, and, the military knows that this is a suicidal affair for no good reason, and they think, in fact, that the reason is, Epstein, which is sort of an exaggeration, but nonetheless. So they're convinced, that this is a no good thing. So they're going to refuse such orders. And if they're compelled to do so, then they're obliged to revolt against the authority, Hegseth, who is ordering them to put the boots on the ground. Now, this is not an appealing prospect for the U.S. military because look what happened to the planes, flying over Iran that were taken down by supposedly absent, air defense system. Now Iran has a new air defense system as well, which the U.S. has no idea of how to stop. I saw one video of the U.S. F-15E being chased by a missile. Now, usually they sort of, shoot off some flares in order to attract the heat-seeking guidance system of the missile. But this missile didn't pay any attention to those heat-seeking, flares at all. It means that they have another sort of, targeting mechanism there, which goes on to the probably the location signal of the plane. All of the military, like each of the soldiers and the planes, have this like a beam thing that identifies the location of that soldier or that plane. So evidently, the missiles have have been programmed, to crack that code, and now they can follow the location beam of the plane in order to target it. And they're not going to turn off that location guidance system because if they are taken down, then there's no other way, to locate them. And even their own, individual pilots, location beam cannot be turned off because otherwise they would be lost. So, like this, the gunner of the plane that was shot down over Iran, he was found by the U.S. military because of his location beam, and that's what's being targeted by these missiles. So they're in a quandary there. The no escape scenario. They're being targeted, and they have to be, and they're leaving themselves open to being targeted, because they want to save themselves if they're taken down. So they're caught in a dead end, literally. Now, if the relationship of forces between the 20 generals and the Crusader generals is about the same, then you've got a scenario for a civil war. Not necessarily in American territory, but elsewhere. Because if there's some military apparatus that refuses to go into Iran, then they become part of the enemy, right? So the Crusader generals are going to target their own military. Now, whether their own military are going to be willing to do that, well, that's another matter. So the scenario being set up, is for a general military overthrow of the U.S. regime and for Trump. And that's why this is the time for the anti-war movement to be out there on the streets calling for Trump to resign. This is the general call now. In fact, that's what the Iran spokespersons have called for as well. They're saying there's no further, 5 conditions anymore. Like it's gone much beyond that. And what they're calling for is the resignation of Trump, the removal of Trump, and then they will end the war. Otherwise, they're going to continue with the war and they're going to wipe off all of the reactionary regimes in the Gulf area, which are all dictatorships, aristocratic dictatorships, who are claiming, and the United States is claiming that they're fighting for democracy and freedom in Iran while supporting all these dictatorships, right? Now, that as well should be mentioned by the anti-war movement. And that's what should be done, today.
Okay, so I was saying the same thing yesterday.
Yeah.
So let's write that down so we have it in our notes. Was your first suggestion, Abraham, is
calling for the resignation of Trump. Trump is an illegal entity who has no right to be the president of the United States.
Trump must resign.
Yeah.
Second, and your second idea.
Well, that would be the end of the war. Calling for a ceasefire, is ridiculous, to call for a ceasefire when the United States is losing is to support the United States of America, save the United States of America from Iran, let's have a ceasefire. That's not an anti-war slogan. That's out of it. That's like some other war. That's not this war.
Okay, so where does Israel fit into this equation?
What would be very interesting is the United States pulls out of this war, which Trump was trying to do, but he can't. So he has to escalate. But if it were to pull out, which it will eventually, leaves Israel alone. Oh boy. Now Israel is fighting a five-front war, and
Which
they could very well lose.
which they cannot uphold. Not
They
possible.
cannot uphold that. No.
Yeah, yeah, or
Mind
excuse
you,
me,
they still have, the
sustain.
popular support to continue with a war like that, but the anti-war demonstrations are becoming more active now, and they cannot be forbidden. But the uh, the activists in the anti-war demonstrations are being arrested and they're being assaulted and all of this, but they cannot be killed, because then the rest of the Israeli population, would revolt against the regime. They would wake up.
Yeah.
So the anti-war demonstrations are going to be growing there. And
Okay,
that has
so
to be sort of publicized and supported, but it's not. There's, maybe one report in a week, by Al Jazeera about Israeli anti-war demonstrations.
so you see this as positively impacting the anti-war movement in Israel.
Yes, it will increase. Yeah, for sure. Hmm. Now, Israel is trying to annex the territory of Lebanon as well, up until
Yeah.
the Litani River. And they're into destroying all the villages in that area and not allowing the 800,000 Lebanese, to return to their own villages and their own homes and their own land. And where are they supposed to go? Well, like the Palestinians, like they're supposed to what? Set up refugee camps, which are subjected
They
to
live in refugee camps their life, their whole life. Yeah.
yeah, subject to attacks, by both Israel and the local fascist militias.
Hmm.
Like the Lebanese are not going to tolerate that. They're going to have to get rid of their own regime. So this is, turning into the anti-war movement is turning into a revolutionary war against imperialism and colonialism by Israel. Now, if there can be a breakthrough in this particular war, perhaps, but a breakthrough is going to be happening, eventually. And the downfall of the all of the reactionary Arab Gulf regimes is a prospect to be looked forward to as well. Downfall of Zionism, downfall of the Trump regime. All of this is up in the cards, like this is all something that can be happening right now. We're moving into an epoch, that could be revolutionary. Although if we lose, could be a new fascist regime, an international fascist regime that would be successful. It's only Iran that is stopping this. Even Russia and China are being rather passive. They're supplying, satellite data for targeting uh, military sites and military infrastructure. But are Russia and China willing to step in here and prevent Iran from being occupied? If they, if Iran is not able to stop the occupation in and of itself, well, that's to be seen, because Iran could very well, be capable on its own, to do so to defend itself. In which case, Russia
Well,
need not, intervene. But if Iran is going to be failing, will Russia and China come in to help them?
well, um, publicly, Russia has condemned Israel for attacking the nuclear power plant that it runs. We know that. Publicly, they've opposed the invasion. They and China have opposed the invasion. So, I mean, then there's always news reports that China and or Russia are providing intelligence information to Iran. So I'm going to say that they're doing that. Um, the issue of them now, also, the Chechens are going to be a Russian surrogate force. They have claimed that, at least according to APT News, it claims that the head of the Chechen Special Forces has said they're going to enter the war if the U.S. troops set foot on Iranian soil. So that could only be approved with the president of Russia's approval. So that's who they're going to send in. So they will be, if what APT is saying is true, if and when the U.S. does occupy or sends an invasion force, the Chechen forces are going to join the fight.
On
So
behalf
we'll
of
see what happens.
Iran, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is on APT, which is I don't know who really runs it, but it seems to be a spinoff of an agency that covers more Russia, China, things in the Central Asian countries, mostly Russia, and the Spetsnaz, excuse me, the head of the special forces from Chechen Republic made a statement about
Mm.
3 days ago that
Mm.
if the U.S. lands troops, they're going to enter the war.
Very interesting. Wow. That's a deciding factor. Very
Wow.
interesting. And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the planned U.S. Invasion from Turkestan by the Kurdish forces has failed. The
Uh,
Kurdish forces have decided not to support the United States.
and the Kurdish forces know better.
Yeah.
Any. I mean, well, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. Maybe they've grown up. The U.S. has always stabbed them in the back. Why are they going to leave the United States now?
Mm.
They've always stabbed them in the back.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. The Syrian revolutionary process has changed that whole dynamic, because the Kurds there have been abandoned by the United States because the United States, can't manage, to support, the Kurdish forces against the Syrian Central Forces military now. So the Kurdish forces are making a deal with Syria for their autonomy, and Syria is granting them their autonomy. And that's what they wanted in the first place, so why would they fight? They don't need to fight anymore. Very interesting development. Yeah. Now, the call for resignation of Trump is no longer just, like a protest movement. It's no longer just an anti-war movement. Calling for the resignation of the president is a revolutionary movement. Only the anti-war movement hasn't realized this yet.
Yeah, that is a problem. Because I was making some calls yesterday about this, and I didn't get the sense that the on the ground activists realize the crisis that has emerged.
Hmm.
Um, or if they do, you're not hearing it in terms of their plans for action.
Hmm.
Let's see. Let me see what, for
Yeah,
example,
there's no sort of, development of slogans and demands. It's all sort of, just a repetition. And that's not, like keeping up, with the pace of events. They're going to
right,
be,
right. Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah. So, well, I don't know what I would expect from Indivisible, but they have nothing. I'm
Hmm.
just looking right now on media. I should be sharing it with you, shouldn't I? Yeah. Here,
If you
I'm
find
just
something, yeah, for sure. Also, if
no,
you
no,
could find out,
no.
what the level of support for Trump is. Last I heard it was down to 33%, but that 33% is enough for him to continue with, especially because
Well,
there aren't. So now,
here,
um,
so this is the
uh,
Indivisible right now. They have nothing. I mean, nothing as far as yesterday. That's a good answer.
no kings, no war. Okay, but that's not, like calling for
That's
the
the that's old
dismissal
stuff.
of Trump. That's okay. They're just asking for another kind of, president. That's a pro-Democratic Party slogan.
Yes, it
That's not
is.
a,
That's exactly what they are.
yeah,
Here's
and
an
that's
answer.
disillusion. Uh-huh.
That's still, it's old.
Yeah.
I'm looking at what's on the websites right now.
Uh-huh.
Let's look at
What about the level of support? If you can find something on the level of support, if it's gone down, that would be very important as well. Now, the way to that the you know the anti that the protest movement, the which must become a revolutionary movement, can not only sort of, do so in terms of demands calling for the resignation of Trump, but it can also do so in more practical ways. What it can do is call upon the U.S. military, appeal to the U.S. soldiers, sailors, and Air Force men and women to refuse to go on strike, calling for a military strike against the war to end the war. This is what, the military should be doing and what we should be contacting the military to do so. So all of the black comrades should be contacting all of their black friends, in the military and tell them this is your time, brothers, like get organized and get ready, because you're going to be ordered, to commit war crimes and you have to refuse to do so. Because if you don't, like refuse, an illegal order to commit a war crime, then you are yourself subject to being prosecuted. That's the argument. Okay, so the military have to be addressed, both from the black comrades, speaking to the black soldiers and military, and, to the general public, appealing to all of the U.S. military to refuse such orders from the Nazi Hexeth and the Nazi Trump regime. This is their.
Would you mind if I put I want to put a piece of paper up here to write this stuff down so we can see what we're talking about here. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Things to do, actions to take.
One is calling for the resignation of Trump. For the resignation of Trump.
Okay. Got it.
2, calling upon the military to go on strike.
3,
A black call to black military personnel to refuse service to the white supremacist regime.
4,
Yeah. 4, if number 4 would be to assume control over, to take control of the government and expel the Trump fascist regime.
Okay.
Hmm.
Look a very powerful short list.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
that covers it.
Yeah, because people need to kind of take action here, and let's not mess around, and we gotta get busy when things change or when events occur. You have to be able to you know make adjustments in your tactics, and you have to have a strategist leading you. And I found people yesterday were kind of almost.
Can you increase the size of that lettering? Because I'm going to screen capture it and then put it out as a cover for this video.
How's this? Is that hold on, I'm gonna
You have
change something.
to rise it, because number 4 is cut off.
You give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll change something here. Oh, let's make it easier. Okay. How's that? I think I gotta make some adjustments here too. You give me a second.
Yeah.
How's that?
So
Any better?
you have to scroll up the the text so I can get the number 4 as well.
Okay, hold on. We can do that. How's that? I can do this too.
Ah, there it is. Okay, good. Okay. I'm
Hold
going to
on.
capture it now.
Oh, the one is gone. Hold on, wait. Hold on.
Okay. Okay. And the header,
That's
there's no
good.
header anymore.
1 second. I'll get it
That's
back.
it. Okay, good. Okay, just leave it.
All right. Should we put a date on here? A date?
Uh,
Probably
no.
should.
So yeah, okay.
April, April 5. Can you see everything still?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'm going to capture it now.
All right.
Uh, okay. Uh,
Got it?
no, I don't get the date.
Okay, hold on.
You have to has to, take out the space at the top.
Well, no,
Okay.
the top has no space, but I I can fix this. Just give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second.
Just put the date at the top, next to the header, and then I can capture it all. No, don't reduce the size of it, just put the date up at the top there,
Okay, all right, I will. I'll do that.
and then ready to be copied. Okay, so
So the thing about when I do this, it makes a little, hold on, I'll make an adjustment. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, I'll fix this now. How about now?
okay, got it all. Okay,
You got it?
okay, yeah. So this is a entirely different program. The U.S. movement, has never sort of approached anything like this program, before. They're gonna,
Yeah, this is something
like,
different.
yeah,
There's,
it's so
there's,
different that they can't, even though they're supposed to be, like, revolutionary minded and all this, when it comes
no,
to something new, they can't cope.
well,
Like they can
they
only
need,
say, say,
I
oh
mean,
yes, I've heard that before, I support that, But if they haven't heard it before, they don't know what to think. They're not, they
well,
don't, people haven't
that's,
developed an autonomy of identity.
well, you have to, I mean, you have to realize that when emergency situation comes, you have to know how to go between crisis thinking and normal thinking. This is kind of crisis thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, when in crisis, you have to change your thinking.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you
You have
don't,
to
then
speed up.
yeah,
Yes.
you gotta speed up a little bit because things are happening very fast, and you have to speed your thinking. But if you don't have a habit of crisis management, then you don't know how to handle a crisis. So we're starting to project that and to take that into consideration and make some proposals.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
I'm used to this, crisis mentality, because I've been living in a crisis mentality all my life, because I'm a
Yeah.
refugee from the Holocaust, So, like have lived, like with the consequences, of a Nazi, Holocaust.
Right,
So
right.
it's not something you can ignore or say, well, it happened in the past. It's not going to happen again, because everybody's opposed to the Holocaust now, like, no, Trump is preparing a Holocaust on the Iranian people. And he's not excluded using a nuclear bomb either, because when he's talking about taking on Iran, if Iran is, he doesn't say it, but if Iran is winning the war, they're sort of, like thinking about what they can do to stop Iran from winning the war. And the only thing they would have left, like is an intermediate range, nuclear bomb to either destroy Iran or to take out, the facilities that they have built up underground. Well, like, and he sort of, poses it in a negative way and saying, well, this is not the big one, meaning, the big one, as if, there's the prospect of a nuclear war, international nuclear war with Russia and China as a feasible possibility. He's saying the big one, not a big one, as a possibility. He's talking about the big one as if it's, an inevitability. Okay, so he's saying, no, it's not that, let's put himself in a good light, saying it's not in favor of nuclear war. No, but the implication is that he's in favor of using intermediate range, nuclear device to try to take out Iran because they have no other choice, otherwise they would lose the war. And they will refuse to lose the war, of course, because they're a bunch of fascists. So what do you do with fascists? You destroy them. That's all. Yeah, that's a rather definitive statement, isn't it? Yeah. But that's how it's posed, by the fascists themselves, because fascism is you submit or die. That's what fascism is. Submit to their authority or you are eliminated. Jewish people of Europe did not submit and they were eliminated, except for a few who escaped. And where did they escape to? Not the United States of America, not Canada. No, these countries here, white supremacist regimes, Christian nation states, refused refuge for the European Jewish population who were trying to escape, from Nazism. And these countries couldn't care less. The only country that offered refuge, and which saved my parents, actually, was the USSR, even though it was a dictatorship. Nonetheless, it was better than the West. When a dictatorship is better than a democracy, you got to question, what that democracy is all about. So, USSR saved how many? Not, like 1,000 here or even 20,000 kids that went to Britain, No, they saved 500,000, mostly Polish Jewish refugees who went to live in the USSR, helped to support the resistance against the invasion of the Nazis. My mother was helping to dig trenches around the city in which she was living in order to stop the Nazi tanks from advancing into the city. My mother, was in the resistance there against the Nazi invasion. And she was there, because Russia allowed her to come in as a refugee. And my father was there too in Russia. I mean, not that, Russia was, workers' paradise or anything like that, but it saved my father's life, And if those Democrats who want to complain, about the repression in Russia, you think my father cares about what the Democrats have to say? Just because he was arrested one time, for missing a day of work. So, he was arrested by a Jewish communist, head of the so-called Soviet, which is no longer elected. And he was put into prison for 6 months for missing a day of work. And so he missed 180 days of work. Wonderful, huh? That's the logic of the bureaucracy in the Soviet Union at the time, which defeated itself and collapsed. But USSR saved 500,000 Jewish refugees. So, I know what that's all about, but not even, the progressive movements, know anything about that. They have no idea what they're doing. But that's the way it is. And now we're telling you all about the way it is now. And there is a revolt brewing. And it's coming to a boil. And when it comes to a boil, it requires what's called a vapor heat of vaporization. And this is the amount of energy required to transform, the liquid water into a vapor. And it takes a lot of energy to break out of those molecular bondings in the water, which is very strong. But once it breaks, it requires very little energy to keep it, boiling, because it's in that state. It's broken through that barrier. And that's what we're about to do. We're going to break through into a vaporization and expand, this revolutionary movement into something that can actually take on the Trump administration. Now, we need to know. Before, the current, most current events of this week, Trump's support, for going ahead with this war, is only at 33%. Now, I wonder what it is at this point. Have you found any information to that effect, Steve?
I haven't looked, but let me take a look. Let's take a look.
Yeah, that would be
Let's,
interesting.
let's take a look and see what we can find about
Yeah.
Mr. Trump and his polling. Let's just look at here. Take this off and see what we got for polling for Trump. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'll find it first, and then I'll put it on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Silver bulletin. Let's see here. Silver bulletin, Substack. Okay, keep reading. Where's Trump looking at now? Oh no, that's the wrong poll.
I think it'll be about the same because that's a pretty hardcore, like segment of the American population there. They're the kind of people who only watch Fox News and they don't know anything about what we're talking about.
Yeah, that is true. Now this is Nate Silver's from yesterday. Let's see here. Uh, Okay, let's try this one here. This is where we usually go. Here we go. All right, so on this one here, I look at people, U.S. adults. I like to look at that because you may or may not vote. Who gives? I mean, I'm not saying I don't care if you vote, but you might not vote. So I want to know people if I want to call out the voters and call in everybody. So we have that here. The first one we have is University of Massachusetts Amherst. This was taken almost a week ago. These aren't really hold on a second. Let's look at dates first. This is the most current one, uh, March 25th to April 2nd. Today is April 5th, okay? But they include voters. So they include voters, which calls out those who don't vote, which is the majority of people don't vote. That's
Just a
important
minute,
to you.
Steve. Steve, can you increase the size of that? Because I can't read the numbers.
Sure, no problem. I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. Okay.
Just do Control Plus.
Control plus.
Yeah,
How's that?
great.
Thank you.
That's good.
Okay. So if they include voters, I gotta move you guys. Sorry. If they include voters,
Oh,
see that's still high. Okay.
yeah.
So this includes then so that the most accurate polls include voters, which means he hasn't really gone down at all among them.
Uh-huh.
No, 18% down in this poll, 8% down. So there has been some loss, excuse me. There has been some loss among the voters right here,
Uh-huh.
but still a very high approval rating. Okay.
Wow.
No, that's the most recent polls. The other ones are not recent. They're not from the last week. Here's vote. So and where we have a voter, likely voters is high. We start getting adults is where it starts to go down. Here,
Uh,
if you look at adults only, that's an older poll, not too old. It's less than a week old, but this poll has he's lost 29% of his approval rating. It's gone down 29% here among adults. That's what
mhm,
I look at because they may or may not vote. It's
mhm.
gone down again with voters involved. He's still in the 40s, 41s.
What's that
Voters.
35% one?
This is adults again. It's an older poll. It's less than it's about a week old. These are adults. So with the adults, you see a big drop, 29% here,
Yeah.
23% here, 22% here. If you call out the voters and say everybody, we see a large drop. 22, 23, 29% loss.
Okay, but
Very
since
little.
when? When is this, since the beginning of the war?
This is the last 5 days.
Yeah, but
This
the
is,
net drop, the negative figures there, that's since the beginning of the war, it would seem.
um, somewhat, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, because the war is a month old. We'd have to look. We have to get some more data. But
Okay,
for
but
the last
okay, but
week,
the 35% one,
yes, that
that's
started on the
that's
27th. That's like a week old. That's a week and a half old. Okay, a week and a half
okay.
old.
Okay, but compared to the newer sort of polls, that would indicate that he's been increasing in his popular support because they think that he's been winning the war.
But that's among voters.
Yes.
But
So,
these are not among these are among voters and non-voters. So if you add non-voters, the his rating goes down significantly. If it's
uh-huh,
just voters, it stays good.
uh-huh,
The
wow,
voters are considered conservative or middle of the road
uh-huh.
because
So that means that's another sort of, point of action that we have to do is we have to organize the voters.
yeah, well definitely the voters are holding him up there. The voters are holding
Okay.
his ratings high,
No,
right?
but I mean, we have to organize the people who have not voted.
Yeah, right. The ones who don't vote are the ones who are breaking it down.
Yeah.
Look,
So we have to organize them to go and vote, or at least come out, to do something. They're not going to come out to a demonstration, okay, but they should be, you know, convinced that, that they have to go out and vote at least, if there's an
and
election.
they can show you can show them in polls that the polls show that they are voting that they don't agree with the government's position.
Yeah.
You said that. That's why when I learned how to read this data differently a few weeks ago, I was looking at it. I looked at what the letters mean. And I noticed that wherever you have vote people who are just adults, which includes voters, but also non-voters. Non-voters puts his drops here. Non-voters 29%. Non-voters 22% drop. Non-voters 23% drop.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody, voters and non-voters. When you only have voters, the drops are very, very small.
Hmm.
18, 6, 10,
Hmm.
18, 11,
Hmm.
18. So you can see when you restricted the voters, you're gonna see, even though it's dropping, this is low. This is still 38%. But the
Wow.
drop around voters, this is the largest drop we've seen. Right. This
Hmm.
is the smallest pro-Trump among voters is 38%. 38,
But I like that
43.
33% there, University of Massachusetts,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
33%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks good.
So when they talk about poll results, as we become more sophisticated in our analysis, we have to look at who are you polling? Who are we talking about here? And um your your idea to reach out to the non-voters and get them involved in some kind of political action is very important. Because
Yeah.
a poll is great, but unless you're engaged in political and economic struggle, it's just your opinion. You have to put your opinion into action.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Okay, we got it. So let's get
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
out and
Okay.
let's make this video work, to stop the war.
That's it. People who are watching us, share, send us your comments, get moving, get involved.
Yeah.
Share this video, have discussions about it. Write us your opinion.
And don't be afraid, you know? Like so many people are afraid, and that they sort of, think that if they do something, any little thing, that they're great, for doing something. It's not enough. Now's the time to go to the max.
True, true. Okay. Thank you, Abraham. Thank you.